Sonic Boom comic, issue 1. There's only 7 or so issues of this, so it's not like it would take that long to review it. I'm not sure how I'm gonna feel about this, but let's begin. Sonic runs away from a giant mecha of Eggmans running across the surface of the water, which is always odd to me since he's hydrophobic normally, and he asks Eggman if he can even see him from up there since he's so high up compared to him. Sonic taunts Eggman generically, saying that he's not intimidating somehow because he's arrogant, and he runs across the arm of the mecha, jumps at one point, and kicks the window in front of Eggman, who just wastes time nitpicking Sonic's dialogue, which took me out of it, honestly. I wouldn't expect an evil robot-making scientist who wants to take over the world to give a shit about whether Sonic misquotes an idiom. I'd think this wannabe dictator would just want to destroy him and be focused on that. Tails shows up and looks forward to taking the giant mecha down, looking like a badass. It's ironic how similar Boom Tails happens to look to Tails in 25 years later of Archie. All he needs is wrinkles under his eyes. I think I almost saw them. I can at least commend this comic right away on starting out with an action scene, instead of having a whole bunch of pointless padding trying to justify them getting to the place where the action scene happens. It's saying right away that action is what matters. This better be a running theme. Then again, it could just be that they want to get the action over with, and the rest of the issue will just be standard sitcom plot that could be in any franchise, considering this is Sonic Boom after all, which never takes anything seriously. Not even this! Eggman's trying to murder Sonic and Tails with a giant mecha. But I guess they're so used to it that they don't even care anymore, and that is a natural consequence of something happening enough. But it doesn't build the tension and get you engaged as well as at least one of them taking things seriously. Tails mentions that the mecha has tripolymer alloy armor. How would he know that just by looking at the outside of it? And hybrid fuel cells and a 5,000 horsepower central engine. He can't see the inside of it. How would he possibly know this? It's not like he's tough and has an earthbending sense. Is he like Nicole with hacking powers? Has he got a mole like Uncle Chuck spying on Eggman to find out what his inventions are made of, given the blueprints of them? Or is Tails just the character who knows everything for no reason just because he's a genius? That was stupid writing in the games, and it's stupid here. He asks Eggman excitedly what kind of torque he gets off the shoulder gears, and what the output of the primary drive is. And I'm glad Eggman has a confused reaction because it lampshades how Tails is being totally distracted and socially inept by asking evil mad scientists these kinds of things when he's trying to kill him. At least this way Tails is shown to have a flaw, in a failed attempt to make up for him being omniscient, because he's the type to get so obsessed with his one hobby that he'll want to talk about it with literally anyone at any opportunity, no matter how dangerous it is. But again, this is someone trying to kill him in a dangerous death machine. This is not how you write action scenes. It's good to have characters contrast each other, and while giving Sonic and Tails nice chemistry is good, you don't have to have them always be in sync at all times. They're just unrealistic. Tails should be afraid in this situation, even if he can't fly, because at any moment, the mecha's arms should be hitting him while he's blathering on, which would be if one of them did, it'd be a great reality ensues moment, and make Eggman competent. Surprisingly, instead of Eggman doing that or calling Tails out on not being afraid of him and missing the point entirely, he takes the opportunity to gleefully brag about his machine. And Tails says his evil death machine is awesome. There were so many missed opportunities with Miles. I mean, come on, this is exactly what an evil twin of Tails would say to Eggman, if he was just as obsessed with engineering as him. He'd admire his engineering skill and act exactly like this. At the same time, I can appreciate how Flynn is writing his character properly here. Rather than being a stuck-up, immature, insufferable genius, like in Lost World, he's being a naive child who's never really been famous for having great social skills since he's kind of a nerd and all. I don't think he's nearly short enough in his design. That's something I really appreciated about his designs in Sad AM and ALSTH. So he doesn't really look like a kid. He looks about the same age as Sonic. And this kind of design problem is why when I was a kid playing nothing but SA2, and I tended to skip all the cutscenes and watch very little of them, I used to think Tails was a teenager too, if a young teenager. If you're wondering why I'm referencing other continuities so often, it's probably because they're a lot more interesting. So far the plot has been as generic can get. Eggman fights Sonic with a giant robot. Where have I heard that before? Even I could write this. The only thing that makes it remotely interesting is the character interaction. I'm really glad Tails is here then. And that Sonic lampshades Tails' behavior. I thought Tails was just gonna help Sonic fight the mecha right away and focus on that. Knuckles then shows up out of nowhere and says they won't get to smash the robot without him. I've been familiar with Boom Knuckles' design for years now, but I still couldn't help but be immediately off-put and caught off guard by how goofy his design looks. Especially in a comic book, when usually the comics take themselves seriously. I mean, it makes sense that he would be acting like this since he's big and muscular, so it would logically make sense that they would need his help. That would be good writing. Knuckles threatens the robot, but his dialogue cuts off, which immediately gives away that he'll get humiliated in the very next panel. This is the exact kind of predictability problem that early Fleetway has. Stop doing that! Stop having dialogue that cuts off like this! This just makes me sad. Good writing would have Knuckles be badass and useful. Surprisingly he actually does get crushed by the robot's foot, instead of Sonic pushing him out of the way to save him, and he's merely pushed into the sand and dazed with his eyes looking weird when logically that should have killed him. So worst mecha ever. It would have killed Mina. This kind of situation was taken seriously there, but here I can only assume that he had rings in his aura to decrease the amount of damage he'd take. But then why is he still dazed if he's not physically injured and have to go to the hospital? I assume so, anyways, because this comic will probably have no guts and try to be comedic. Amy lampshades that Knuckles let the foot stomp on him as she pulls him out of the sand. A part of me wishes that they just called this version of Knuckles something else, and had the real Knuckles be established to be guarding the Master Emerald with his actual personality intact. Maybe they could call this guy Buffles or something, and he'd be his older brother. But no! That just gets fans angry because they want Knuckles around the heroes all the time, and not a brand new Echidna character, never mind that they were fine with Shade and Tikal's father, and all the Echidnas in SA1. So instead, they completely derailed Knuckles' personality and design to make him completely unrecognizable, to the point where there's no point in having it be Knuckles just for the sake of marketing purposes. And people complained about that too, for obvious reasons, because of his design. You can't win with this fanbase. I still stand by it. They should have just had a different character entirely in this kind of position. There's no point in having Knuckles here if he's going to be so completely unlike him. Even with all the different versions of Sonic and Tails in the franchise, they still have some things in common. Sonic is always arrogant and heroic and snarky. Tails is either smart or the cute underdog, but is the plucky sidekick either way. Knuckles is not Knuckles. But at least this tries to give Eggman a moment of threateningness because he succeeds in hitting a main hero with his mecha. And Amy calls the mecha dangerous. But again, he's probably not actually injured from it, so it's just hollow. I tend to appreciate originality in a Sonic continuity because it's the thing that gives it its worth. So I'm willing to give this totally out of character Knuckles a chance as his own character. After all, he is entertaining, saying that he's giving himself an intro, and it implies that this version of Knuckles is super into pop culture, to the point where he watches TV enough, or maybe reads comic books enough, to know that heroes in cheesy action series do this kind of thing. Knuckles wouldn't ever know anything about pop culture, but this isn't him, this is Buffles. I wish I could call him Buffles for the entirety of these reviews, but sadly I don't think I could call him that every time with a straight face. I'd probably just burst out laughing in the middle of a commentary again. But yeah, my point is that I hate how incompetent Buffles is shown to be here. What's the point of making him look way more muscular and strong if he's not going to live up to that? The logical way to write this kind of character in an action series, remember, would be to make him genuinely strong and badass to compensate for the fact that he's not too bright. I'm sure tons of action series do that. I'm thinking of Tarzan right now. It's never good for the Sonic franchise when there's too much emphasis on trying to have comedy at the expense of action, especially since it usually isn't even funny, and that's the problem with Sonic Boom. He weakly lies that he was given the mecha a false sense of security. Amy says that Eggman always thinks he can win, and she orders him to get behind the left knee of the mecha and wait for her mark. So, is she the discount Sally of this comic? the leader making most of the plans? That's a weird position for Amy Rose to be in. Normally she's the comedy relief character, and Knuckles is the more actiony one. In fact, I would buy Knuckles as the leader more than her, even if he's not always portrayed as smart, because he's not nearly as much of a comedy relief character. Amy doesn't look that sympathetic here, just bossy, and Knuckles is naturally annoyed with her for it. I'm already aware of the one twist in this comic's history because it's the one plot point everyone remembers and talks about, and it's the one thing I remember about when I was reading the comics tropes page several years ago, which doesn't speak well to the comic's memorability. But yeah, this bitterness from him is probably foreshadowing. I like that he is bitter with her instead of being a happy puppy dog, even in the most unbelievable of times, just because he's the idiot of the group who's there to be oblivious comedy relief. Instead, he's reacting realistically like a normal person might, which gives him added depth that the show might not have. Amy orders Tails to keep him distracted, and Sonic and Knuckles to both hit the cockpit on her mark, because apparently she's very familiar with how this mecha is designed and knows for a fact that hitting it in specific weak spots will severely damage it when she didn't make the mecha. I guess she just has a lot of experience with fighting mechas then. Shouldn't Eggman hear Amy and stop Tails because he realizes he's just distracting him? Immediately hit Tails away with the arm? I always hate selective hearing in fiction. At least this way Amy's being useful in some way, to compensate for the fact that she's nothing but the hammer girl, when literally anyone with enough of her body strength could swing a hammer around. Here, she's also the leader, coming up with smart plans. I guess the idea is that Tails can't do this because he's the naive kid and so he's not focused enough. And Sonic is just about fighting Eggman, apparently. Because that's all he is, apparently. Amy's the only one taking the action scene seriously, and it's very good to have a character like that. But seriously, you could replace her with Sally here and it'd be exactly the same. And at that point, the only reason it's her and not a brand new character is for marketing purposes. Again, because these are all the main characters of the Sonic series. They're together. Even though Amy wasn't remotely a main character until Sonic Adventure, but let's ignore that. When all the characters are saying ready, Eggman says ready too for no apparent reason, even though we should know he's not part of their team. So that was forced. Why is Tails saying ready when he was just told to keep them distracted? He wasn't gonna do something, was he? Because of Amy's plan, the mecha topples over into the water because the characters all hit the right parts of it all at the same time. That's still a giant mecha going down after just a few hits though. They gotta have super strength, how else would this work? And then I'm expected to believe that the mecha can float on the surface of the ocean and do the backstroke, even though it should be way too heavy for that. Because it's a giant metallic mecha. That was dumb. But if that didn't happen, then it would sink and Eggman would die. Then Styx runs up to the hero saying it's an emergency, and Sonic says they just sent Eggman packing, naturally assuming that she's panicking over nothing. Then there's an unnecessary fourth wall breaking moment because Styx somehow knows that Sonic said her name is a logo, even though she shouldn't be able to see the words in his dialogue box. Although that is admittedly pretty charming the first time. But it still takes me out of it. I bet the writer thought it was so brilliant having the character point out something meta. No other writer would do this. Then Sonic actually joins in on the unnecessary fourth wall destruction by saying it's a first issue gimmick. How would Sonic be aware of this and respond to her like that instead of just thinking she's crazy, which she is? Sonic shouldn't be reacting like this at all. I could understand Styx because she's crazy and that's the whole joke with her. It's her whole identity as a character. But the other characters I'd expect to be more grounded in their reality because they're actually in touch with reality. This is why Styx makes me feel sorry for her. There are people who are like her in real life. It's weird to have a Sonic the Hedgehog character who's entirely based around mocking the insane. She says that Tails' house has been robbed. Tails stammers and is realistically upset, and Amy feels bad for him and shows sympathy. And Knuckles can't wait until they catch those thieves so they can give them what they deserve. I was impressed by this panel because the characters are all taking the situation seriously and reacting like I'd expect. It's not all jokes. Now I'm looking forward to there being a villain other than Eggman for a change. Oh, it better not just be Orba and Cuba. That would be so stupid and lame. Come on. Of all the potential thieves on that planet, why would it be Eggman or someone who works for Eggman just because they're the main villains? Why can't it just be some regular thieves? Although it would be a smart plan of Eggman's because it would give his unsuccessful mecha fight a secondary purpose. He was distracting them while his robots robbed Tails' workshop. But you'd expect Tails' workshop to have a security system to prevent exactly this. And while he is the naive kid, you'd think Amy, being the serious leader character, would order him to make a security system, and he'd agree because he's an engineer. How could there possibly be nuclear rubber bands? This is like Sonic Lost World, where I'm expected to believe Tails made a working computer with ridiculous materials like dishwater because over-glorifying it. He asked what got stolen when Styx clearly told him that all of it was robbed. And then it turns out that his entire house was stolen from him, not just the stuff in it. So it's a clever pun because Styx said robbed when she should have said stolen. This kind of joke would have worked better for a character who's established to have screwing up English as a canon personality flaw. It makes sense if that was Styx because she's the tribal character who's supposed to be a jungle dweller originally. So she maybe didn't always speak English. That's supposed to be Knuckles' role, but whatever. It's all topsy-turvy with the characters in Sonic Boom. And it wouldn't be original without it, apparently. Amy corrects Styx's grammar, immediately reminding me of Pontac and Graph's constant problem in Colors of having characters explain the joke. It makes sense for her to do this in universe at least, but it makes it feel less funny when the characters point it out. It's like the writer's being too proud of its own joke. You go from satisfied with yourself, from noticing the grammar joke yourself, to not being as happy about it. Styx says that the house was stolen by what she calls a cyborg rock golem, because apparently she doesn't know what cyborg means. At first I thought this was just characterizing her as crazy and delusional, but then I realized that from a jungle dweller's perspective, that'd be a pretty apt description for a robot or mecha of Eggman's, so that makes sense. Sonic lampshades that Eggman was stupid by not using the mecha to attack the heroes in their sleep. Yeah, that was stupid. It sure is convenient for them that you didn't think to do that. But to be fair, this is in character for Eggman. There's been plenty of times when he should have just taken the smart option and won immediately. It's just that Eggman being treated like a complete failure by the heroes doesn't look very good when you consider how long this has been a problem in modern Sonic. Ever since Sonic Unleashed in Colors, well, sure, he had threatening and competent plans, but then he just gets made fun of by his robots all game and falls over when he tries to kick one, and then Sonic Boom happened. It doesn't feel like he deserves to be the main villain of the series if he's going to be mocked like this all the time. They turned him into a parody of himself, which is the kind of thing fanfiction does sometimes. And the problem is that he's so overexposed. Why not have serious villains to contrast him and make up for the lack of a competent serious threat? Which SA1 did, SA2 did, Heroes did, for good reason. It's not like I'm not satisfied with the Heroes' victory over the mecha, since it took long enough. But Sonic Boom as a whole shouldn't just have one villain. I hope it'll have more of a rogues gallery than that. I'm pretty sure the TV show does. That's one good thing about the Boom games. At least Lyric gave you a serious villain to make up for Eggman. But they're kind of putting a band-aid on the problem. They should make Eggman the threat. You shouldn't necessarily need to have to share the spotlight with someone who actually is a serious threat. Styx says she saw the cyborg golem take away Tails' house from under the ground. It's a good thing she saw that so she could warn the heroes about it when she doesn't live with Tails or live anywhere near him. So why did she think of even going there? Does she regularly hang out with Tails? Sonic makes a very no-shit plan. I look back on this as, oh, like Sonic is so simple-minded. Sonic is just about fighting Eggman. Just go smash stuff. I feel like This is not just who Sonic is. But you're going to see, as we progress through this comic, that apparently this is all who Sonic is. When Sonic makes good plans regularly. Tails is worried about them potentially smashing his house when they try to get it back. So apparently his workshop is his whole house, by the way, which felt weird to me in SA1, and it's even weirder here because I expect better world building from a comic book than that. Wouldn't you just keep your tools in a tool shed and have your house have the regular rooms of a house? Guess not. I guess Tails preferred to save on space and have his house be a workshop too. Again, I really like how Tails is like reacting realistically to this. Like he's being very relatable. He's not trying to be a comedy character. Amy doesn't bother pointing out the problems with Sonic's simplistic plan. Like the one where they have no idea how to find the golem. And I get Knuckles' line about assuming it really was the cyborg rock golem because Eggman can make anything he wants. Amy tells Knuckles that Eggman snuck a device under Tails' house which gathered up the surrounding rock, creating the rock cyborg. And she's just assuming all this without finding the device first. And Knuckles somehow still doesn't get it after a very simple explanation. This guy's gonna be the definition of forced comedy. Having characters be stupid past the point of believability isn't funny to me, and I've noticed it was a really big trend in Butch Hartman shows like Danny Phantom or Fairly Odd Parents with Timmy's parents, and I always hated it. There's a difference between understandable stupidity and this. I don't understand how this can be considered funny. I'm just confused and annoyed by how forced this is. Even Sonic Boom Rise of Lyric. From what very little I remember of Knuckles' dialogue since I didn't play the game, I remember that Knuckles had dialogue that was stupid, but made sense from a certain perspective. Like, there are things inside these things. That is a factually accurate statement. It just happens to sound stupid. And like Sonic said enough with the psychic stuff when he was talking about a plant. I don't remember that very well. Anyway, Styx then catches the scent of a robo-golem somehow. Because apparently those things have sense to them. Unfortunately, it's actually confirmed that Styx's great sense of smell is a canon skill of hers. So that's cool. Sonic says it's because she's a jungle dweller and calls it amazing. I don't think living in the jungle would magically make you a superhuman at smelling things. But I like that Boom Sonic is impressed with something instead of lying around napping and not caring about anything and being grumpy all the time. Something tells me he'll be written better in the comics than in the show. But based on what I heard about the show, that wouldn't exactly be hard. So I like Tails and Sonic being amazed by Styx's skill and respecting an aspect of her for it. It kind of tries to make up for the fact that she's the comedy character by showing that she can be more than that. But again, how can a rock golem have any sort of sense to it? It's not like it carried around a red fish with it like in Twilight Princess. This plot's so thrilling that I'm referencing a million different things. Styx laughs and says that she just thought the grass smelled nice, and she's been following the giant footprints instead. Okay, that makes more sense. And I still like that Tails and Sonic had that moment because it shows that yes, she is supposed to have a great nose for tracking stuff. But at the same time, it's not completely ridiculous. But shouldn't everyone have noticed these footprints, instead of her having to tell them about it? Sonic asks what kind of sneakers the mecha would wear, fortunately looking intimidated instead of just smugly trying to make a joke. And Knuckles is the smug one instead, trying to look smart. And Amy snarks that he's anything but with her arms crossed and rolling her eyes. I don't blame Knuckles for glaring at her, and with his arms crossed too, and I love that Amy actually looked nervous. Because plot convenience, they immediately spot the rock golem as it's still busy walking. Though actually does make sense because something that gigantic might be pretty slow and wouldn't have made it to its destination by the time their fight with the mecha was over. It would be slow to keep the house and everything in it from being destroyed in the rush. I think if it was running, the house would be shaking. But logically, you'd think Eggman would have put a jetpack on the thing so it would reach its destination way faster. Maybe some wheels so that it takes off a lot faster instead of relying on feet and legs and it'll topple over if it loses them. Tails flies up to his house and is relieved that all of his possessions are intact. Naturally, as Eggman was trying to steal them for himself. I still would have preferred if it wasn't him for a change. But at least this rock golem thing is more exciting than it being regular thieves and they have no way of knowing who stole everything from the house, so there'd be no plot. Unless there's a security camera. Then it could be like them trying to find the thief. Unless he was really well disguised anyways. Knuckles is once again the funny dialogue character. Somehow not knowing that the mecha's hat is Tails' house when he should be familiar with it, and when he was blatantly told that it stole his house, and he says that Tails lives in a hat. That line at least was amusing, but it's still forced that he'd say any of this. And he's not saying this kind of dialogue with a goofy smile, so it's not like he's intentionally trying to be a comedian, especially since they never laugh, so he would have given up really quickly because it just annoys them. It's a shame because that would have made more sense than him being unbelievable all the time. He's just a living, breathing immersion breaker. He better actually do something. Sonic tells his friends to get ready to ambush the thing near the open lot, while he'll bring the giant to them by luring it to them. I like that he's taking things seriously. There are things I like about this issue so far, but again, any writer could do that. We don't need it to be Flynn. Sonic makes the robot run after him, and again breaks the fourth wall unnecessarily by referring to his name as a logo. Who talks like that? I hated these kinds of jokes in early Archie. Tails asks Styx what she's doing all the way up on top of the rock golem. Why the fuck is she here? She can't fly! This better be explained properly, like her having a jetpack of Tails's, except the jetpack should be in the workshop. She says that what she's doing is checking his gutters for wiretaps. You know, considering that his house was just taken by a mecha of Eggman's, maybe she has good reason to be paranoid that Eggman would do this to spy on them. Sadly, the dialogue insists on having her say they instead of he, so it makes less sense because she has less reason to be paranoid of the government than of Eggman. The government would be supportive of the heroes fighting Eggman. That's part of her personality in general. She doesn't trust modern government at all. Even though she's a jungle dweller, and ancient tribal people would be way more about blind obedience to the tribal chief, and might makes right. But I guess this is the paranoia in her brain being stronger than her jungle dwelling side. I guess they're never gonna establish how they met Styx, right? Maybe she's a wild child who grew up alone in the jungle, abandoned by her parents. Okay, feral children in real life can't talk. At least not without severe practice. And they make Styx look well-adjusted. So, she must have had some social interaction, or she'd be really sad. But if she lived in a jungle town with jungle people, which would explain why she survived, why would she ever leave? Couldn't be that Eggman destroyed her village and everyone in it, because oh no, that'd make him a competent threat and that'd just be too dark and edgy. She's a brand new character and a main character in a new continuity, and she feels like she should really have a backstory. But instead, she's just here, and they already know her. As I keep wondering how she got up here without Tails or an invention of Tails, so that was another forced joke, Amy does some calculations about where the rock golem might end up falling. Amy does some calculations. They basically rewrote her entire character. Knuckles asks why they're missing out on the action, and Amy gets annoyed with him questioning her and tells him to think for a change. Again, I love that Knuckles glares at her here, and while looking all dark for emphasis. Normally I'd say that Amy was being written out of character like a fanfiction by a writer who hates her purely for the sake of forcing Knuckles to turn on her later, and she is. This is Flynn after all. But because this is Sonic Boom, most of the main characters are out of character to start with because that's part of what makes the continuity original. So it's not just Flynn's fault, they're like that in every part of Sonic Boom. But still, this Amy bitchiness in particular is exclusive to the comic, and can be blamed entirely on Flynn. It does make sense though because Amy is the serious one in this continuity. She barely ever seems to smile. So she'd be just as annoyed as I would by Knuckles. They're hardly friends though. And I'd like to think that I would be more polite to him than pointing out that he's stupid, instead of just rolling my eyes and being quiet. She and Knuckles both attack the golem, and I guess Styx does too. And Sonic spin dashes a hole through the center of the golem to make Tails' house land on the floor. Okay, first of all, why did he need his friends then? What'd they accomplish? That kind of shits on the moral of Rise of Lyric, by the way. And second, Tails' house landing like that should have shattered his floor into pieces and probably damaged the walls and roof from the jolt of the impact. It would have been destroyed and given us a bittersweet victory, and required Tails to come live with Sonic. But that wouldn't happen because that'd be realistic and dark. Styx says that her fortune cookie from off-screen said that it'd be raining stones later, and it was right. That's an oddly accurate fortune cookie. I guess in the Sonic universe, fortune cookie makers are psychics. And she tries to look on the bright side, saying that they could use the rocks of the golem to help them. I like that she's a look on the bright side person. You're gonna see this again next issue. Eggman tells Orbot and Cubot that his breakfast will lose its evilness if it goes cold. How can a breakfast be evil? So he uses evilness as a synonym for cool and excellent. That explains it. Kind of. Abusive parents would have made more sense. It turns out that the cliffhanger is Knuckles asking to team up with Eggman already, when I thought it'd take a few more issues than that. He's been putting up with Amy for his entire life, so I understand why eventually after all of that, he would snap and get sick of her. He's got a very low status in his group of supposed friends, so naturally he gets sick of it. And since he's an idiot, he wouldn't understand morality enough to understand why he should stick with the heroes all the time when they're not treating him like really good people might. Knuckles siding with Eggman is nothing new, of course. But what is new and pretty brilliant is that he's doing it not because he's gullible, but because he's genuinely sick of how his friends treat him. It's a reality ensues moment. A deconstruction of how Sonic always treats him in the games, except it's Amy, not Sonic. So there's less of an impact there. It's only for this continuity. I'd rather Amy be put in the mean to Knuckles position than Sonic though, because that's something I feel is really played out and makes him look unsympathetic. We've had that same kind of joke since Sonic X, and I really hate how Sonic treated Knuckles in Worlds Collide. This issue was by Ian Flynn, and the plot was that Tails' house got kidnapped by a device creating a rock golem under it, which is pretty interesting, and Sonic spin dashes the golem to get the house back in one hit. That's it. An incredibly basic plot that was given to substance by all the dialogue. The character interaction, as the issue introduced their personalities. Knuckles and Amy are completely different. In fact, they might as well have the roles reversed because it's supposed to be Knuckles who takes everything seriously, and Knuckles who gets annoyed at things easily. And I loved how naive and chipper Tails was. And Sonic wasn't always being cocky all the time. He took the rock golem and its house theft seriously, and so did everyone else. I should have never gotten my hopes up that a villain other than Eggman stole from Tails' workshop. But the rock golem is more interesting anyways. We could have had a villain with magical powers over rocks create the golem instead though. Even if he would have to be working for Eggman, because what would he be doing with Tails' workshop? I liked the subplot where Knuckles naturally gets fed up with his low position in his group and wants revenge. Especially since a part of me would rather believe that this was why Knuckles sided with Eggman the last few times in the games. Like in Sonic Advance 2. At first, Eggman genuinely tricked him, but eventually, maybe a part of Knuckles would get sick of being treated like an idiot by his friends and want to take an excuse to deck him for it. And Knuckles worked for Eggman when Sonic first met him, so him doing this here feels right, like it's being addressed. I don't see how he'd be happy anywhere though, because there's nowhere he would get the respect he wants considering what an unbelievable idiot he is. Unless, like, he became a big-time villain and people were only giving him respect out of fear. So even when he goes back to his friends because status quo gutlessness, he's not going to have a logical reason to be happy there when he wasn't happy before.